Hello and welcome to another MOOG demo library. In today's video, we're going to be exploring Muse, and in particular, we're going to focus on the modulation oscillator. This is a really powerful feature of Muse in that it can be used as a per-voice analog modulation source, or additionally as a third audio rate oscillator in the mixer if we want to thicken up some of our patches or emulate some mini MOOG Model D style patches. Now, it's different as a modulation source from all of the other mod sources on the panel in that we can't use it in the mod map and there's no assign button. But what we have done is predetermine some modulation routings to try to get the most power out of it as a mod source on the panel. So it's able to modulate the pitch of oscillator 1 and 2 independently. It's able to modulate the cutoff of filter 1 and 2 independently. It's able to modulate the pulse width of oscillator 1 and 2 independently when they're set to pulse on the wave mix. And then it's able to modulate the VCA level for tremolo effects, or if I engage pan, it's able to modulate the pan position of a voice. Right now, let's just listen to how it sounds modulating the pitch of oscillator 1. And I could use it to modulate the pitch of oscillator 2 and it would have the same effect, but for simplicity's sake, let's just listen to one oscillator for now. Right now I have it set to a sine wave, and let's hear how it sounds. So as you can hear, we can get everything from a subtle vibrato to really extreme pitch sweeps. And you might also notice that its analog behavior results in some interesting phase relationships between voices where it's not operating it as a global LFO, so there are some slight differences between voices and cycles. Next, let's go ahead and listen to how it sounds modulating both filters at the same time. I'm going to go ahead and set filter 2 to around 50%. Filter 1 is set to a high pass, also at 50%, and they're operating in serial, so the filter 1 runs into filter 2. And we'll get a bandpass response as the modulation oscillator sweeps both of them. So let's hear how that sounds. So as you can hear, once again, we can go from subtle to extreme, and in that case, you really should hear some of the interesting phase relationships that emerge as notes are held down. So next, let's listen to how it sounds modulating the pulse width of oscillator 1. I'm going to go ahead and set the wave mix to a pulse, and you'll notice that I have the pulse width set to around 50%, so I'll get a square wave out of it. And let's hear how this sounds. You can hear that I can push it far enough that the pulse gets so thin and results in silence. But I can dial it back and just get classic PWM. Next, let's hear how it sounds modulating the VCA level. So we can get some really nice tremolo sounds, and then let's engage pan and hear how that sounds. So you can hear our voice now sort of moves around in stereo based on the cycle of the modulation oscillator. Additionally, we can turn on keyboard reset, and what that's going to do is every time a key is played, it's going to reset the cycle of all of the modulation oscillators in the voices so that we can get a more consistent behavior on the onset of notes. But you'll still notice that after the notes play for a while, the phase begins to deviate again despite the reset. This can be a nice way to give us a more consistent behavior on the onset of notes. Additionally, we can engage unipolar mode, and what that's going to allow us to do is only modulate a panel parameter upwards. So let's say I have my filter set to 50%, and I only want to modulate the cutoff upwards so it gets brighter and not go above and below the position. I can do that using the unipolar mode. Another fun thing that we can do while we're operating at sub-audio rates is turn on keyboard tracking even though it's an LFO. And what that's going to result in is lower notes having slower cycle times while higher notes have faster cycle times. So we get an interesting relationship between notes across the keyboard. So as you can hear there, our higher notes have faster tremolo while the slow notes have a really slow tremolo happening. So next, let's look at using it at audio rate. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to engage audio and bring the mod oscillator up in the mixer. With the keyboard tracking off, I'm just going to get a static note. But if I engage keyboard tracking, then we can get it tracking the keyboard, but as you can hear, it's out of tune. So I'm going to go ahead and turn hold on. I'm going to play one note. And I'm going to tune the modulation oscillator. And once I have it close, I can also hold down Shift and adjust the frequency knob to do a fine tune. We've been listening to the modulation oscillator as a sine wave, but I'm going to go ahead and set it to a sawtooth. You also have a ramp wave, a square wave, and a noise wave available to you when using the modulation oscillator. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring oscillator 2 up. I have it dropped an octave lower. So as you can hear, we can use this to get some nice thick 3 oscillator patches. Really add some weight to our sound. Now, while it's running at audio rate, we can also use it still to modulate any of these panel parameters to get audio rate FM. So let's go ahead and just listen to oscillator 1 again. I'm going to set its waveform to a triangle wave, and I've set the modulation oscillator back to a sine wave, and I'm going to engage oscillator 1 pitch modulation, and let's hear how this sounds. So as you can hear, we're able to achieve some interesting audio rate modulation from the mod oscillator. And one powerful thing that we can actually do is use the envelopes or LFOs to modulate any of these amount knobs in the modulation oscillator to add an additional layer of modulation. So as you can tell, the modulation oscillator is a really powerful feature of Muse in that we can use it to add extra weight to our sound or add extra per voice movement to any of the modulation that we're using, and because it's an analog modulation source, we get that really unique and organic phase relationship between voices. So it's a really powerful way to incorporate some interesting sounds into your sound design.